I mean, from the time I was about 4 years old, I was surrounded by wrestlers, and they were all working out in the basement in those days, in the actual dungeon, and actually shooting down in the dungeon and wrestling for all they were worth back in those days. And my dad used to, funny enough, used to make beer in the next room, and it was kind of a drunken free-for-all every weekend, where the wrestlers would be, you know, wrestling on the mat and drinking beer and lifting weights, and I'd just be a little kid sort of wandering around through the legs of these big giant wrestlers back in, I'd be about 1959, 60. And, you know, growing up, from the time I was about 4 years old, 5 years old maybe, I got to watch up close, because I used to sit at the timekeeper table. But I got to watch some of the real great wrestlers of those days, like Buddy Rogers. I watched Luthez. I watched Pat O'Connor. I watched all the guys that in the years ahead became world champions, and even Gorgeous George, I think I watched in as a kid, and it gave me a great because I got to watch the wrestling from up close. I got to really study wrestling, and you know, I was one of those kind of guys that kids that I kind of graded wrestlers even in those days, and I always thought wrestlers that went for a drop kick and the guy took a big fall without, like when he got missed by this much, to me they got to fail. They were like lousy wrestlers. And I was very critical as a kid growing up of good wrestlers and bad wrestlers, and I think those kind of things are what defined me later on as a wrestler. But as a kid, I just was really fortunate that I had such a good opportunity to really study so many of these great wrestlers that were working in those days. And a lot of those great wrestlers, and even over here in the UK, were just as good as the wrestlers today. They were great showmen, and lots of varying styles. And the beauty of working for my father, you know, for most of my career, early part of my career anyway, was at Calgary, where we were based in, or we had like Japanese wrestlers that were quite good from Japan, that were very technical wrestlers. Of course, they couldn't speak any English. And same with, we used to get a lot of Puerto Rican wrestlers. And we used to get wrestlers pretty much from all over the world. We had, even back in those days, we used to get a lot of the wrestlers from the UK, some of the great wrestlers that worked over here, like Billy Robinson and Les Thornton. Were all guys that started for my dad in Calgary. And as a kid, they brought over the English style wrestling with lifters and, you know, fancy moves and rolls and flips, and you know, which wasn't necessarily my style, but I sure learned a lot from a lot of those English wrestlers that came over. And sometimes you just would pick one or two little moves that they did and sort of make them your own. And over my career, things like Russian suplexes and just a lot of the moves I did, I picked up from a lot of the English wrestlers and a lot of the Japanese wrestlers and the Puerto Rican wrestlers. I learned how to make fire, they call it in wrestling, where you get to explode and make a big comeback on your opponent. And the best place to go learn that kind of stuff was Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rican wrestlers were very fiery and exciting kind of guys to watch. And